Everyone in the room thought she was about to become his wife. They didn't know she was about to become his biggest mistake. The chandeliers were too bright. That's what Nora would remember later. Not the faces, not the laughter, but the way the crystal caught every angle of light and threw it back, sharp and unforgiving. The ballroom of the Meridian Grand wasn't just full. It was curated. Investors in tailored silence. Media placed at calculated distances. Two families standing at the center of a moment designed to look perfect from every camera angle. Nora stood beside Lee Junho on the stage, hands folded, posture flawless. The dress they'd chosen for her was ice blue silk, elegant, expensive, forgettable. She'd learned early that being forgettable was sometimes the safest thing you could be. Phones were already raised. Hundreds of them. Recording. Streaming. Saving. The officiant began to speak. And then, Junho laughed. The officiant's voice rolled through the room like white noise, formal, rehearsed, forgettable. This wasn't a wedding. It was an engagement confirmation ceremony, a performance for people who needed their investments to photograph well. Nora felt the weight of phones before she saw them. Hundreds of screens raised like a congregation, recording, streaming, saving. Her face stayed composed. It always did. Then Junho laughed. Not a chuckle. Not nervous energy. A full, genuine laugh that cut through the officiant mid-sentence. The room inhaled. Junho turned toward the crowd, microphones still clipped to his lapel, and smiled the way men smile when they think charm erases consequence. Okay. He raised both hands like he was calming an audience that hadn't moved. I have to come clean. Nora's stomach didn't drop. It went still. This whole thing. Junho gestured between them, grin widening. It was a bet. Silence fractured into confusion. A few scattered laughs, uncertain, testing. He fed off it. 6 months ago, my boys said I couldn't close a deal this clean. That I couldn't make someone like her. He glanced at Nora, almost apologetic. Believe it was real. The laughter grew. Uncomfortable. Delighted. Spreading. So I said, watch me. Junho shrugged, hands in his pockets now. Casual. Untouchable. And here we are. I just needed proof I could win. The room erupted. Not in outrage. In release. The kind of laughter that comes when people realize they're allowed to enjoy cruelty if it's packaged as cleverness. Nora didn't move. Didn't gasp. Didn't cry. Didn't run. She stood exactly where she'd been standing, hands still folded, face still composed, and that was what made the phones lift higher. Because a woman's composure in the face of humiliation is always more fascinating than her collapse. Someone whispered, "Is she okay?" Someone else whispered, "She's not even reacting." The officiant stepped back. Junho's family looked away. The investors went quiet. And Nora stood there, perfectly still, while the chandeliers burned overhead and the laughter echoed and the cameras saved everything. But if you watched closely, if you looked past the silk, the posture, the practiced calm, you might have seen it. The smallest shift in her eyes. Not pain. Recognition. If you enjoy emotionally intense stories like this, make sure you're subscribed to Velvet Plot. What happens next isn't loud, but it's devastating. Nora reached for her left hand with her right. The movement was so small, so deliberate, that it took 3 seconds before anyone noticed what she was doing. The ring came off without resistance. White gold. Flawless cut. Chosen by a committee. She held it for a moment, not looking at it, not looking at Junho, just holding it the way you hold something that no longer has meaning. Then she set it down on the podium where the officiant had left his notes. The sound it made was almost nothing. A whisper of metal on wood. But in a room that had gone silent, it was deafening. She turned. Not toward Junho. Not toward the crowd. Just away. Her heels made no sound on the carpet as she stepped off the stage. No one moved to stop her. No one seemed to know if they were allowed to. Lee Hairin's mouth opened. Lee Sung-ho's hand twitched toward a phone. The investors watched like they were seeing a stock price drop in real time. Nora walked the length of the ballroom alone. Past the tables with their untouched champagne. Past the photographers who'd stopped recording because no one had told them what to do with this. Past the double doors held open by staff who stared straight ahead, trained not to see. The last thing the room heard was the elevator chime. Then she was gone. It took 4 minutes. 4 minutes for the first clip to hit social media. The angle was from the back of the room, shaky phone footage, someone's gasp caught in the audio. The caption was already written. He admits she was a BET at their own engagement party skull. By the time Nora reached the parking garage, it had 20,000 views. By the time her car door closed, it had 200,000. The driver didn't ask where to go. He'd been briefed for situations. Just not this one. She sat in the back seat, hands in her lap, and stared at nothing while the city blurred past the tinted windows. Her phone was on fire. She could feel it vibrating in her clutch. Text after text. Call after call. Notifications stacking like debris. She didn't open it. The headlines were already writing themselves, and she knew every word before they appeared. Socialite humiliated at own engagement ceremony. The bet that broke the internet. She really thought he loved her. They'd frame her as naive, ambitious, a girl who reached too high and got exactly what she deserved. They'd dissect her outfit, her background, her silence. They'd wonder why she didn't fight back. They'd make her the punchline. The car slowed at a red light. The city thrummed around her, alive, indifferent, already moving on to the next thing. She exhaled. And then, so quietly the driver almost didn't hear it, Nora whispered. It finally happened. Not a question. Not a lament. A statement. Like she'd been waiting for something to break. And now it had. The office was silent in the way only power can afford. No assistants hovering. No phones ringing. Just floor-to-ceiling glass overlooking a city that looked small from this height, and a single desk made of wood so dark it swallowed light. Kang Min-suk sat behind it, perfectly still, and watched the video. Once. His expression didn't change. Not at the laugh. Not at the confession. Not at the moment she removed the ring. When it ended, he tapped the screen. Paused it. Rewound 10 seconds. Her face, frozen mid-frame. Composed. Unreachable. He studied it the way architects study fault lines. His assistant stood near the door, tablet in hand, waiting. She learned years ago not to speak until he invited it. Min-suk leaned back in his chair, leather, Italian, older than most of the men who worked for him. When was this ceremony scheduled? His voice was quiet. The kind of quiet that made people listen harder. 7:30 this evening, sir. And when was it confirmed? 3 weeks ago. Invitations went to 240 guests. Media clearance was arranged through. Did she authorize it? The assistant paused. That wasn't the question she'd expected. She scrolled quickly, double-checking files she'd already memorized. The ceremony was coordinated through the groom's family and their event team. Approvals came from his PR firm, his legal counsel, and... Did she authorize it? The assistant's throat tightened. No, sir. Her name doesn't appear on any of the planning documents. She was informed. Silence. Min-suk didn't move. Didn't nod. Didn't react. But something in the room shifted. He closed the video. Opened a different file. A contract. Dense, technical, bound by clauses most people would need a legal team to parse. He scrolled to page 47. Section 12. Subsection D. His finger stopped on a single line. The party of the second part shall not be subject to public representation or media exposure without prior written consent and 72 hours notice. He read it twice. Then he closed the file. Pull the list, he said. Sir, everyone who signed off on that ceremony. Everyone who knew she'd be on that stage. I want names, firms, and financial relationships. The assistant's fingers moved across her tablet. Should I flag this as priority? No. She looked up. Min-suk was staring out the window now, hands folded on the desk, expression unreadable. Flag it as breach of contract. The words landed like a gavel. The assistant swallowed. And the response protocol? He didn't answer right away. On the street below, traffic moved in predictable patterns. People went to dinner, celebrated engagements, made bets, laughed at strangers' pain. Minsuk turned his chair back toward the desk, opened a drawer, pulled out a fountain pen that cost more than most people's monthly salary, and wrote a single name on a notepad in handwriting so precise it looked printed. Then he looked up at his assistant. They violated the contract. Not angry, not surprised, just factual. Like he was noting the weather. The assistant's grip tightened on her tablet. She'd worked for him long enough to know, when he got quiet like this, entire departments reorganized. When he wrote a name down by hand, someone's world was about to narrow. "What would you like me to do, sir?" Minsuk capped the pen. Set it down with care. "Nothing yet." "Sir." He stood, walked to the window. The city glittered below him, full of people who thought they understood how power worked. Let them think they won. The assistant nodded once, turned to leave. She was halfway to the door when he spoke again. "And get me her file." She stopped. "The complete file?" "Everything." The door closed with a whisper. Minsuk stood alone in the dark office, hands in his pockets, watching the city breathe. Somewhere out there, a man was laughing. Somewhere out there, a woman was sitting in silence. And somewhere in between, the contract had been broken. The file was thick. Not because her life was complicated. Because it was protected. Minsuk opened it on the glass table in his private conference room, the one without cameras, without assistants, without anyone who might remember what was said. The first page was a photo. Professional. Recent. Her face composed, intelligent, unremarkable in the way that made people forget you were in the room until you spoke. He turned the page. Name. Redacted in public records. Age. 27. Background. The file didn't start with childhood. It started with a scholarship. Full academic ride. Applied mathematics and economic theory. Graduated summa cum laude from a university most people couldn't afford to visit. He kept reading. She wasn't from money. But she was never poor in the way people assumed. Her parents were civil engineers. Stable. Practical. The kind of people who built bridges and understood load-bearing weight, literal and metaphorical. She'd worked 3 jobs through university. Not because she had to. Because she wanted to owe nothing to anyone. Minsuk flipped forward. Employment history. The list was short. Selective. 2 years at a mid-tier consulting firm. Quiet. Competent. The kind of analyst who found patterns no one else saw and never took credit. Then nothing. A gap. 6 months of nothing. He stopped. Went back 3 pages. Found it. A single-line contract annotation, buried in legal footnotes. Retained under private consultancy agreement. Classification. Strategic advisory. Duration. Confidential. Funding source. Secured through external capital structure. His jaw tightened. She hadn't disappeared. She'd been placed. He turned the page. Career track. She was a strategic analyst. The kind corporations hired when they needed someone who could see 12 moves ahead and never appear in the annual report. Her work was clean. Airtight. She built financial models that saved companies millions. Identified risk before it became loss. Restructured debt so quietly that boards never knew she'd been in the room. And she'd done it all under a sealed contract. Which meant someone had backed her. Quietly. Carefully. Someone had seen what she could do and decided she was worth investing in on the condition that she stayed invisible. No media. No public profile. No attention. She was supposed to be a ghost. Until tonight. Minsuk leaned back in his chair. Stared at the photo again. She'd stood on that stage because someone told her it was part of the arrangement. That visibility was temporary. Controlled. She'd trusted the system. And the system had sold her out for champagne and cameras. He closed the file. Stood. walked to the window. The city looked the same as it always did. Bright, busy, full of people making deals and breaking them. But now he knew something they didn't. The woman they were laughing at online, the one they were calling naive, disposable, a cautionary tale. She wasn't a victim. She was a controlled asset. And someone had just made her visible without authorization. His phone buzzed. A message from his assistant. File complete. Additional note, her contract included a protection clause. Any unauthorized exposure triggers immediate review and potential legal action. He read it twice, then typed a single response. Who holds the contract? The reply came instantly. You do, sir. Minsuk set the phone down, looked at the file one more time. Her face, calm, composed. A woman who'd been trained to stay in the shadows. A woman who'd just been dragged into the light. A woman who, until 4 hours ago, had been under his protection. And he hadn't known. He opened the file to the last page. A handwritten note. His own signature at the bottom. 3 years old. If this investment is ever compromised, all protective measures activate immediately. No exceptions. He'd written it himself. And then he'd forgotten. Because she'd done exactly what she was supposed to do, stayed invisible. Until someone made her a bet. Minsuk closed the file. She was protected. Until today. The words hung in the empty room. And for the first time in years, he felt something close to anger. Junho was still laughing when he got to the after-party. Not the official one. That had dissolved the moment Nora left, guests scattering like they'd witnessed a crime, investors mumbling about early meetings, Hyrin retreating to the hotel bar with a look that could crack marble. No, this was the real party. The one his friends had planned for after. The one where you didn't have to pretend. A penthouse suite 12 blocks away. Whiskey. Cigars. Men in expensive watches who treated life like a scoreboard. They cheered when Junho walked in. There he is. The legend. I can't believe you actually did it. He accepted a glass. Loosened his tie. Dropped into a leather chair like a king returning from battle. 6 months, he said, grinning. 6 months of playing the perfect guy. You know how hard that is. They laughed. One of them pulled up the video on the TV, the moment replaying in high definition. The way she just stood there. Ice cold. Do you think she knew? Junho shook his head. No way. She believed every word. He took a sip. That's what made it work. His best man, the one who'd made the original bet, leaned forward. So what do you win? Bragging rights. Isn't that enough? Come on. We had terms. He shrugged. You cover my next 3 trips. And you admit I can close anything. They raised their glasses. The video played again. And again. Someone screen recorded it. Posted it to a private group chat with 40 people. Then 80. Then, Junho's phone buzzed. A text from his publicist. We need to talk. Morning. 8 a.m. Do not post anything else tonight. He ignored it. Another text. Sungho. Call me. He muted the thread. Another. A journalist. Would you be willing to comment on? He turned his phone face down. They're going to make this a thing, one of his friends said, half laughing, half nervous. Let them. Junho leaned back. It was harmless. A joke. People will forget in a week. What if she talks? And says what? He spread his hands. That she didn't see it coming? That makes her look worse, not me. They laughed again, but it was thinner now. Uncertain. Someone changed the subject. Someone opened another bottle. The party went on. The next morning, Junho did 3 interviews. Not because he wanted to. Because his PR team said damage control meant getting ahead of the narrative. So he sat in clean shirts and apologized in the way people apologize when they don't mean it. It was poor judgment. I didn't think about how it would look. I never meant to hurt anyone. And then, off camera, to a reporter he thought he could trust. Honestly, it was just a bet. Harmless fun. People are so sensitive now. The reporter nodded. Smiled. Published it 2 hours later. By midweek, Junho was doing walkthroughs at his office like nothing had changed. Shaking hands, taking meetings, laughing with the team. A few people looked at him differently, but most didn't, because men like him had always gotten away with things like this. His investors stayed quiet. No calls, no emails. He took it as approval. They don't care, he told Sung-ho over lunch. Business is business. Sung-ho said nothing, just cut his steak with surgical precision. That afternoon, Junho's assistant mentioned that a board meeting scheduled for Friday had been moved. To when? They didn't say. They said they'd follow up. He frowned. Who moved it? The notice came from the chairman's office. Did they give a reason? No, sir. Junho stared at his calendar. The meeting had been on the books for 6 weeks. A major quarterly review. The kind of thing you didn't just reschedule. Get them on the phone. I tried. They said the chairman is unavailable. Unavailable? Yes, sir. He leaned back in his chair. It was probably nothing. A scheduling conflict. Someone's vacation. Still, something about the silence felt wrong. His phone buzzed. Another text. A private equity contact he'd known for years. Hey, can we push our coffee? Something came up. Junho frowned. Typed back, no problem. Next week? The response took 4 minutes. I'll get back to you. He set the phone down. Looked out his office window at the city below. Busy. Bright. Moving. Everything looked the same. But somewhere, just at the edge of hearing, something had started to shift. Nora hadn't left her apartment in 3 days. Not because she was hiding. Because there was no point in going anywhere. The internet had already decided who she was. Naive. Desperate. A social climber who got what she deserved. Her face, calm, composed, frozen in that moment, had become a joke. When you realize you're the punchline. POV, you just found out you were a bet. She really thought. Her phone had gone silent 2 days ago. The calls and texts had peaked, then crashed. Even concern had a shelf life. She sat by the window now, coffee gone cold, watching the city pretend she didn't exist. A knock. Not at the door. At the building's lobby intercom. She almost didn't answer. But the voice on the other end was calm. Professional. Ms. Seo. I'm here on behalf of someone who'd like to speak with you. May I come up? She should have said no. Instead, she buzzed him in. He wasn't what she expected. Mid-50s. Quiet suit. The kind of man who looked like he'd spent his life in rooms where decisions were made and never explained. He didn't apologize for the intrusion. Didn't offer pleasantries. Just set a slim folder on her coffee table and sat across from her like they'd done this before. My employer wanted me to check on you. Nora stared at the folder. Didn't touch it. Who's your employer? The person who holds your contract. Her throat tightened. She'd almost forgotten. The contract. The quiet backing. The protection that had kept her invisible for 3 years. I didn't authorize that ceremony, she said. We know. I was told it was mandatory. Part of the arrangement. It wasn't. She looked up. The man's expression didn't change. You were placed under a protection clause 3 years ago. Any unauthorized public exposure triggers an immediate review. What happened at that ceremony violated the terms. Nora exhaled slowly. So what happens now? That depends on you. He opened the folder. Inside, financial records. Legal documentation. A list of names she didn't recognize. Your contract included contingencies, he said. If you were ever compromised, certain measures activate automatically. Protective measures. Like what? Pressure. Strategic. Nothing illegal. Nothing traceable. Just consequences for those who violated the terms. She stared at the documents. You're talking about Junho. I'm talking about everyone who put you on that stage without your consent. Her hands curled in her lap. I don't want revenge. This isn't revenge. It's enforcement. I don't want him destroyed. The man tilted his head slightly. Then what do you want? Nora looked out the window. At the city. At the people moving through their lives, unaware that hers had been dismantled in front of cameras. "I want to disappear," she whispered. "I want to go back to being invisible." The man was quiet for a moment. Then he leaned forward. "You can disappear," he said. "We can relocate you. New city, new name, new contract. You'll be protected again. Safe. Invisible." She closed her eyes. It sounded like erasure. "Or," he continued, voice dropping, "you can be unbreakable." Her eyes opened. He didn't move. Didn't smile. Just watched her with the patience of someone who'd seen people make this choice before. "What does that mean?" "It means we don't hide you. We rebuild you. On your terms. With your consent." He gestured to the folder. "You were always supposed to be behind the scenes. Brilliant. Essential. Invisible. But now you're visible and that can't be undone. So we change what visibility means." Nora stared at him. "You're not a victim," he said quietly. "You're an asset. And assets don't run. They appreciate." The words hung between them. She looked down at the folder again. At her name. Her work. The 3 years of analysis and strategy that no one had ever seen. "If I do this," she said slowly, "what happens to Junho?" "He collapses." Quietly. "Not because we destroy him. Because the system he relied on stops working for him. And if I say no, then you disappear." And he keeps laughing. Nora was quiet for a long time. Outside, the city moved. Indifferent. Infinite. She thought about the stage. The laughter. The phones. The way Junho had looked at her like she was nothing. The way she'd stood there silent, composed, and felt something break. Not her. The illusion. She picked up the folder. Opened it. Read the first page. Then looked up at the man across from her. "You can disappear. Or you can be unbreakable." The choice sat in front of her like a door she couldn't see through. And for the first time in 3 days, she felt something other than numb. If you're enjoying this story so far, take a moment to subscribe. The choice she makes next changes everything. It started small. So small Junho almost didn't notice. A meeting that ran long. An email that went unanswered. A call that went to voicemail and stayed there. He'd been in business long enough to know that timing mattered. But this felt different. This felt like friction. The first sign came on a Thursday. His CFO walked into his office with a printout, actual paper, which meant it was serious. "We have a problem with the Zenith deal." Junho looked up from his laptop. "What kind of problem?" "They're asking for additional diligence. Financial records going back 7 years. Third-party audits. They want verification on." The CFO hesitated. "Everything. That's standard." "Not at this stage. We already cleared due diligence. This is new." He frowned. "Did they say why?" "No. Just that their board wants to be thorough." Junho leaned back. "So we give them what they want. It'll take weeks. Maybe months. The deal was supposed to close next Friday. Then we work faster." The CFO nodded. But his expression didn't change. He left the printout on the desk. 2 days later, another meeting postponed. This time with a regulatory contact, someone Junho had worked with for 5 years. Low-level government. The kind of relationship he maintained because it kept things smooth. The assistant's message was brief. "He can't make lunch. We'll reschedule." No explanation. No alternative date. Junho called directly. Voicemail. He tried again the next day. Voicemail. By the following week, 3 more deals had slowed. Not canceled. Not rejected. Just stalled. Permits delayed. Contracts under review. Investors requesting more information before committing capital. His legal team couldn't explain it. "Everything's in order," his lead counsel said. "There's no legal issue. It's just, everyone's being extra careful." "Why?" "I don't know." Junho spent an hour on the phone with his head of business development. "Are we being targeted?" "By who?" "I don't know." "Competitors. Regulators. Someone." "There's no pattern. No single entity. It's just a pause. It feels like everyone's suddenly risk-averse." He hung up. stared at his calendar. 6 deals in motion. All of them slowing at once. Coincidence? It had to be. The board meeting finally happened. 2 weeks late. No explanation for the delay. Junho walked in expecting the usual quarterly review. Numbers. Projections. Approvals. Instead, he found silence. The chairman sat at the head of the table, expression unreadable. The other board members avoided eye contact. "Gentlemen," Junho said, taking his seat. "Let's get started." The chairman folded his hands. "We need to discuss risk management." "Of course. I have the reports. Not financial risk." The chairman's voice was calm. "Surgical. Reputational risk." The room went still. Junho felt his chest tighten. "I'm not sure I follow. There's been attention. On the company. On you. You're talking about the engagement. I'm talking about public perception. That was personal. It has nothing to do with. It has everything to do with how our partners perceive stability." The chairman leaned forward slightly. "We've had 3 investors express concern. Not about performance. About judgment." Junho's jaw clenched. It was a private matter. It was recorded. Shared. It reflects on this company whether you intended it to or not. "So what are you saying?" The chairman didn't blink. "We're saying you need to manage this. Quietly. Effectively. Before it affects our positioning." "It's already handled." "Is it?" No one answered. The meeting continued. Numbers were reviewed. Projections were discussed. But the tension never lifted. When it ended, Junho was the first one out the door. That night, he sat alone in his apartment. City lights stretched out below him. Endless. Indifferent. His phone sat on the table, dark. No calls. No texts. He opened his email. Scrolled through the threads. Responses that used to come in minutes now took hours. Days. Meetings that used to get scheduled immediately were now pending confirmation. Deals that should have closed were under additional review. Nothing catastrophic. Nothing he could point to. Just resistance. Like the entire infrastructure he'd built his career on had shifted half an inch to the left. Enough that nothing fit quite right anymore. Junho stood. Walked to the window. Pressed his palm against the glass. The city looked the same. But somewhere out there, in boardrooms, in offices, in quiet conversations he wasn't part of, something was moving. Something he couldn't see. Couldn't name. Couldn't stop. He whispered it into the empty room. "It feels like someone's watching." And for the first time since the ceremony, he felt afraid. Lee Sung-ho made the call. Not because he was worried. Because he was prepared. Men like them didn't wait for problems to become crises. They investigated. They controlled. The firm was discreet. The kind that corporations hired when they needed answers and couldn't afford questions. 2 investigators. Former intelligence. They arrived in suits that cost less than Junho's watch but fit better. They sat in Sung-ho's study, wood-paneled, soundproofed, designed for conversations that didn't leave the room. "We need to understand what's happening," Sung-ho said. "Deals are stalling. Relationships are cooling. We need to know if this is coordinated." The lead investigator, gray hair, steady eyes, pulled out a tablet. "We'll need access to communications. Financial records. Lists of everyone involved in recent transactions. You'll have it. And we'll need to know about the engagement incident." Junho's jaw tightened. "That's not relevant." "Everything's relevant until we determine it isn't." Sung-ho nodded once. Permission granted. The investigation took 11 days. They worked quietly. Requested nothing that would trigger alerts. They just looked at patterns, timelines, connections. And what they found made the lead investigator request a second meeting. This time, both father and son were present. The investigator opened his tablet. Pulled up a document. Redacted. Heavily. "You're being pressured," he said simply. "Systematically. Professionally." "By who?" "We don't know." Junho leaned forward. "What do you mean you don't know?" "I mean whoever's doing this is very good at not leaving fingerprints." The investigator swiped through screens. but we found patterns. He turned the tablet around. A list of names, companies, regulatory bodies. These are the entities that have slowed or stalled your deals in the past 3 weeks. Notice anything? They both scan the list. Defense contractors, private equity firms, government liaisons, banking institutions. Sung-ho's face went pale. These are all connected to high-level financial networks. Yes. The investigator pulled up another screen. And they're all linked, indirectly, to a single consulting ecosystem. What ecosystem? That's where it gets complicated. He swiped again. The connections are buried. Shell consultancies, advisory firms. They all trace back to a holding structure that's. He paused, choosing his words carefully, exceptionally well protected. How protected? The kind of protection that requires legal architecture most corporations can't afford. He looked up. This isn't amateur hour. Whoever's behind this has institutional-grade resources. Junho's hands curled into fists. So what are you saying? Someone's targeting me. I'm saying someone's applying pressure. Calculated. Invisible. Nothing illegal. Nothing you can challenge in court. He gestured vaguely, making things harder. Why? That's what we tried to find out. The investigator swiped to a new file. And that's where we found her. The word hung in the air. Her. The woman from the ceremony, the investigator continued. Her name kept appearing in redacted files. Not directly, but in footnotes, annotations, references to a protected asset under a sealed consultancy agreement. Junho felt something cold spread through his chest. What does that mean? It means she wasn't just some woman you dated. She was under contract. Professional contract. The kind that comes with clauses about confidentiality, protection, and, he paused, consequences for breach. Sung-ho spoke for the first time. Breach of what? Unauthorized public exposure. Silence. The investigator let it sit. Then continued. When you put her on that stage, when you made that announcement in front of cameras, you didn't just humiliate her. You violated the terms of her contract. And whoever holds that contract. He trailed off. They're coming after me, Junho finished. Not directly. They don't have to. They're just removing support structures. Making sure doors that used to open easily now require extra steps. It's elegant, really. Nothing you can prove. Nothing you can fight. Sung-ho's voice was tight. Can we find out who holds the contract? We tried. The investigator closed his tablet. Every search hit a wall. Legal barriers. Sealed records. The kind of protection you only see with. He stopped. Junho leaned forward. With what? The investigator met his eyes. With people who have the resources to make entire ecosystems shift without ever appearing in the room. After the investigators left, father and son sat in silence. The study felt smaller than it had an hour ago. This is insane, Junho finally said. She was nobody. A consultant. An analyst. How does someone like that? She wasn't nobody. Sung-ho's voice was quiet. Cold. She was somebody's investment. And you just devalued her publicly. So what do I do? Sung-ho stood. Walked to the window. Outside, the city glittered. Oblivious. You apologize. I already. Not publicly. Not for the press. He turned. You apologize to whoever holds that contract. You acknowledge the breach. And you hope they're willing to negotiate. And if they're not? Sung-ho didn't answer. Because they both knew. If the person behind this didn't want negotiation, there wouldn't be one. That night, alone in his apartment, Junho pulled up the video again. Watched it for the 100th time. Nora's face. Calm. Composed. He'd thought she was weak. He'd thought she was nothing. But now, standing in his empty apartment while his world quietly contracted, he finally understood. She hadn't been nothing. She'd been protected. And he'd just learned the difference. Someone whispered in his memory, maybe the investigator, maybe his own thoughts. We bet on the wrong woman. And, for the first time, he believed it. The invitation arrived by courier. Cream cardstock. Minimal text. The kind of formality that came from institutions, not people. You are invited to speak at the Meridian Forum on Strategic Leadership. Topic: Navigating public perception in high-stakes environments. Date: 3 weeks from receipt. Attendance closed. Professional networks only. Nora read it 3 times. Set it on her kitchen counter. Stared at it for 2 days. The man in the quiet suit returned on the 3rd day. Same knock. Same calm. He didn't ask if she'd received the invitation. He knew she had. It's your choice, he said, sitting across from her again. No pressure. No expectation. Nora picked up the cardstock. Who arranged this? People who think you should have a platform. If you want one. To say what? Whatever you want. He folded his hands. The forum is invite only. Investors. Executives. Institutional leaders. The kind of people who make decisions that shape markets. The kind of people who are at the ceremony. Some of them. Yes. She set the invitation down. So this is what? A chance to tell my side. It's a chance to exist on your own terms. He leaned forward slightly. You've spent 3 years being brilliant in private. Solving problems no one knew existed. Making people successful while staying invisible. That was the arrangement. And now? Now you're visible whether you want to be or not. The question is, who controls that visibility? Nora looked out the window. The city moved. Constant. Uncaring. 3 weeks ago, she'd stood on a stage and been erased in front of cameras. The internet had decided who she was. A punchline. A cautionary tale. She'd thought about disappearing. Starting over. Becoming invisible again. But every time she closed her eyes, she saw it. The laughter. The phones. The way Junho had looked at her like she was a prize he'd won and discarded in the same breath. And beneath the humiliation, beneath the silence, something else had been growing. Not rage. Clarity. She turned back to the man. If I do this, she said slowly, I'm not going to attack him. No one's asking you to. I'm not going to cry. Or beg for sympathy. That wouldn't be you. Then what am I supposed to say? He was quiet for a moment. Then, the truth. Not his version. Yours. Nora picked up the invitation again. Ran her thumb along the edge. What if I'm not ready? Then you're not ready. And that's fine. You can walk away. Disappear. Rebuild somewhere else. No judgment. But you've never walked away from anything in your life. The words landed like stones. She looked at him. He didn't smile. Didn't push. Just sat there with the patience of someone who'd already seen her make this decision. 3 years ago, you were given a choice, he said. Stay visible and vulnerable or become powerful and invisible. You chose power. You chose to build things that mattered without needing credit. And that worked. Until someone took the choice away from you. She felt it again. That break. That shift. So what happens now? Nora whispered. Now you choose again. He gestured to the invitation. You can let them define what happened. Let the story stay his. Or. He stopped. She finished the thought. Or I can be unbreakable. The words felt heavier this time. Not a promise. A decision. That night, Nora stood in front of her mirror. The same mirror she'd stood in front of before the ceremony. When she'd put on the ice blue dress and told herself it was temporary. Now she looked different. Not broken. Not hiding. Just done hiding. She thought about the forum. The stage. The audience of people who'd watched her humiliation and done nothing. She thought about what she'd say. Not revenge. Not a sob story. Just the truth. That she'd been brilliant in the dark. That she'd made people successful while staying nameless. That she'd been told the ceremony was mandatory and that it wasn't. That contracts mattered. That consent mattered. That she wasn't a bet. She was an investment. And someone had just learned the cost of mishandling her. She picked up her phone. Typed a single message to the man in the quiet suit. I'll do it. The response came instantly. Good. We'll prepare. Nora set the phone down, looked at herself in the mirror one more time. 3 weeks ago, she'd stood on a stage and been erased. In 3 more weeks, she'd stand on a different stage. And this time, she'd choose to be seen. The Meridian Forum didn't feel like a stage. It felt like a courtroom. Minimalist. Precise. 200 seats arranged in tiered semicircles around a central platform. No podium. Just a chair, a microphone, and nowhere to hide. Nora arrived early. Not because she was nervous. Because she wanted to see the room fill. Wanted to watch them walk in. Executives in tailored suits. Investors with portfolios worth billions. The architects of industries. The kind of people who decided which companies lived and which ones quietly folded. Some of them had been at the ceremony. She recognized faces. A venture capitalist who'd laughed. A board member who'd looked away. They recognized her too. The energy shifted when she entered. Conversations paused. Eyes tracked her movement across the room. She wore black. Simple. Sharp. The kind of outfit that didn't apologize. And she walked like she belonged there. Because she did. The panel began at 2. 3 speakers. She was last. The moderator, a woman in her 50s, editor of a financial journal, introduced the topic with clinical precision. Today we're discussing visibility, risk, and the consequences of public exposure in professional contexts. The first speaker talked about crisis management, corporate apologies, damage control. The second talked about reputation in the digital age, how quickly narratives form, how hard they are to change. Then the moderator turned to Nora. Our final speaker needs no introduction, though perhaps she deserves a better one than the internet provided. A ripple of uncomfortable laughter. Nora stood, walked to the center, sat in the chair, adjusted the microphone, and looked out at 200 faces. Silent. Waiting. She didn't smile. Didn't perform. She just spoke. 3 weeks ago, I stood on a stage I didn't choose to be on. Her voice was calm. Clear. I was told it was part of an arrangement. That visibility was temporary. Controlled. That I'd be protected. Silence. I wasn't. She let the words sit. For 3 years, I worked as a strategic analyst. I built financial models. I identified risk. I helped structure deals that saved companies millions. I did it quietly, effectively, without credit, because that was the agreement. A few people shifted in their seats. I was never supposed to be visible. That was the entire point. I was valuable because I was invisible. She paused. And then someone made me visible without my consent. On camera. In front of investors, media, and family. And he did it as a joke. The room was so quiet she could hear the air conditioning. I'm not here to tell you I was hurt, or humiliated, or devastated. Her voice didn't waver. I'm here to tell you that what happened wasn't just cruel. It was a breach of contract. Murmurs now. The ceremony I appeared at was never authorized. Not by me. Not by the entity that held my professional contract. And yet I was placed on that stage. Recorded. Distributed. Turned into content. She leaned forward slightly. So I want to be very clear about something. The room held its breath. I wasn't a bet. I was an investment. And when you mishandle an investment, she paused, there are consequences. Movement at the back of the room. The doors opened. Junho walked in. The groom. The man who'd laughed on that stage. He looked different now. Thinner. Tired. Like someone who hadn't slept well in weeks. He'd come to watch. Maybe to prove he wasn't afraid. Nora saw him. Everyone saw him. But she didn't stop. Consent isn't just a personal value, she continued. It's a professional one. When you put someone in a position they didn't agree to, when you expose them without authorization, you don't just hurt them. You violate a system of trust that entire industries depend on. Junho stood at the back. Frozen. And when that system is violated, she said, voice steady, it responds. Another movement. This time from the side entrance. A man walked in. Older. Composed. The kind of presence that didn't announce itself, but demanded attention anyway. Nora recognized him from the photograph in her file. The man who held her contract. Kang Min-suk. He didn't sit. Just stood near the wall. Arms folded. Watching. The moderator glanced at him. Then back at Nora. Are you saying the moderator began carefully, that there were professional repercussions? Nora didn't answer directly. Instead, Min-suk spoke. His voice carried without effort. May I? The moderator nodded. Min-suk stepped forward. Not onto the platform. Just closer. 3 years ago, he said, we identified a strategic analyst with exceptional capabilities. We offered funding, mentorship, protection. In exchange, she agreed to work quietly, to build value without visibility. Every eye in the room turned to him. That arrangement included a clause. A very specific clause. She was not to be exposed publicly without 72 hours written notice and explicit consent. He paused. 3 weeks ago, that clause was violated. By multiple parties. At a ceremony she was told was mandatory but never authorized. Silence. So to answer your question, he looked at the moderator, yes. There were repercussions. He turned toward the back of the room. Toward Junho. Because she wasn't a bet. He let the words hang. She was an investment you were never qualified to touch. The room erupted. Not in applause. In whispers. Sharp, urgent, spreading like wildfire. Cameras, press had been allowed for this session pivoted. From Nora. To Min-suk. To Junho standing at the back, face drained of color. The moderator tried to regain control. I think we should. But it was already done. The story had shifted. The narrative had flipped. And everyone in that room, investors, executives, architects of industries, understood exactly what had just happened. She wasn't the victim. She was the asset. And he'd just been publicly devalued. Nora stood. Walked off the platform. Past Min-suk. He gave her the smallest nod. She returned it. And walked out of the forum. Behind her. Silence. Then cameras. Then chaos. But she didn't look back. It took 72 hours. That's how long it took for the world Junho had built to finish crumbling. Not dramatically. Not publicly. Just quietly. Efficiently. The way professionals dismantle things when they've already decided the outcome. The first call came the morning after the forum. His lead investor. The one who'd backed his last 3 ventures. We need to talk about positioning. Junho knew what that meant. I can explain. It's not about explanation. It's about exposure. Our fund can't be associated with a pause, contractual violations. That's not what happened. That's exactly what happened. And it's on record. In front of 200 industry leaders. The line went dead. By afternoon, 2 more investors had pulled out. Not publicly. No press releases. No statements. Just quiet withdrawals. Capital redirected. Partnerships dissolved. His CFO delivered the news in person. They're citing strategic realignment. But we both know what this is. Junho sat behind his desk, staring at nothing. How bad? 3 deals are dead. 4 more are under review. The Zenith acquisition is officially terminated. Can we recover? The CFO was quiet for too long. I don't know. The board meeting happened 2 days later. Junho wasn't invited. He found out when his assistant forwarded him the calendar notification after the fact. Emergency session. Executive leadership review. He called the chairman directly. Voicemail. He tried the vice chairman. Voicemail. Junho drove to the office anyway. Security stopped him in the lobby. I'm sorry, sir. The meeting is closed session. I'm on the board. I have instructions not to allow entry during executive review. He stood there. In his own building. Being denied access. By a security guard who wouldn't meet his eyes. The decision came via email. Formal. Legal. Unanimous. Effective immediately, you're being removed from active operational leadership. An interim CEO will be appointed. You will retain your equity stake, but will have no decision-making authority pending the resolution of ongoing reputational concerns. Junho read it 3 times. They hadn't fired him. They'd erased him. The media caught up by the end of the week. Not the tabloids. The serious outlets. Financial Times, when contractual violations become career killers. Wall Street Journal, the hidden cost of public humiliation in professional networks. Bloomberg, how one ceremony unraveled a rising executive's trajectory. They didn't mention his name in the headlines. They didn't have to. The story had already been told. At the Meridian Forum. On camera. In front of everyone who mattered. And the new narrative wasn't about a bet. It was about consent. Contracts. Consequences. Sung-ho called once. You need to disappear for a while. Where? I don't care. Just away from here. Let this settle. And then what? Sung-ho's voice was cold. Distant. Then we see what's left. The line went dead. Junho sat in his apartment that night. The same apartment where, 3 weeks ago, he'd celebrated with whiskey and laughter. Now it was silent. His phone was silent. The city outside was silent. Or maybe he'd just stopped hearing it. He pulled up his social media. The original video, the one from the ceremony, was still there. Still viral. Still being shared. But something had changed. The comments were different now. Wait, she was under contract? He violated a professional agreement and thought it was funny? This isn't just cruel. It's a liability. The narrative had shifted. He wasn't the clever one anymore. He was the cautionary tale. Junho scrolled further. Found a new video. The clip from the forum. Nora. Calm. Composed. Speaking with the same quiet dignity she'd had on the stage that night. And then, the man stepping forward. She was an investment you were never qualified to touch. The video had 8 million views. The comments were unanimous. He closed the app. Stared at his reflection in the darkened screen. Somewhere out there, she was rebuilding. Somewhere out there, systems were realigning. And he was standing in an empty apartment, watching his world contract, finally understanding what he'd actually done. Not just humiliated someone. Not just made a joke. He'd violated a contract. With someone who had the power to enforce it. The next morning, his assistant resigned. His lawyer stopped returning calls. His friends stopped texting. And the video from the ceremony, the one that had made him famous for exactly the wrong reasons, was slowly being replaced by the other one. The one where the truth came out. The one where he became the punchline. And there was nothing Junho could do but watch. Nora didn't celebrate. There were no victory dinners. No champagne. No moment where she stood on a balcony and felt vindicated. Because this wasn't a victory. It was just over. The week after the forum, she went back to work. Not to the shadows. Not to invisibility. But to something new. A private office. Small. Glass walls overlooking the city. Her name on the door. Not hidden, not erased, just there. Minsuk had offered her a choice. You can go back to the way things were. Quiet. Protected. Essential but invisible. She'd considered it. For about 30 seconds. Or, she'd asked. Or you stay visible. On your terms. You build the career you want. With support. With protection. But without hiding. Nora had signed the new contract the next day. The work was the same. Strategic analysis. Financial modeling. Pattern recognition that saved companies millions. But now, when she walked into meetings, people knew her name. Not because of the ceremony. Because of what came after. The first meeting was the hardest. A boardroom. 12 executives. Half of them had probably seen the video. Nora walked in with her portfolio, her models, her recommendations. And she delivered them with the same calm precision she always had. When she finished, the CEO leaned forward. That's excellent work. Thank you. I have to ask, he hesitated. After everything that happened, why stay in this field? She met his eyes. Because I'm good at it. Simple. True. The meeting continued. And when it ended, they signed. The messages started coming in the second week. Professional inquiries, speaking invitations, requests for consultation. Some were genuine. Some were vultures hoping to monetize her story. Nora ignored the vultures. Accepted 3 speaking engagements. All professional forums. All focused on her actual work. No one asked about the ceremony. They asked about risk modeling, strategic forecasting, how she identified patterns others missed. And she answered, because that's who she'd always been. The ceremony hadn't changed that. It had just made it visible. She thought about Junho sometimes. Not often. Not with anger. Just occasionally. Wondering if he understood yet. If he'd realized that the thing he'd destroyed wasn't her. It was his own credibility. She'd heard through professional channels that he'd left the city. That his company was being restructured. That his name had become shorthand for a liability. Nora felt nothing about it. Not satisfaction. Not pity. Just distance. Like hearing about weather in a place you used to live. One evening, 3 weeks after the forum, she stood at her office window. The city spread out below her. Lights coming on as dusk settled. Her phone buzzed. A message from Min-suk. How are you doing? She smiled slightly. Typed back. I'm working. Good. That's what I like to hear. A pause. Then another message. You know you don't have to prove anything. Not anymore. Nora stared at the words. Typed slowly. I'm not proving anything. I'm just being who I always was. The response came quickly. That's exactly my point. She set the phone down. Looked at the city again. Somewhere out there, people were still talking about what happened. The ceremony. The forum. The fall and the rise. But she wasn't those things. She wasn't a viral moment or a cautionary tale or a revenge story. She was an analyst. A strategist. Someone who saw patterns and solved problems. That's who she'd been before. And that's who she was now. The only difference. She didn't have to hide it anymore. Later that night, Nora went home. Small apartment. Nothing extravagant. She made tea. Opened her laptop. Reviewed models for tomorrow's presentation. Normal. Quiet. Hers. And for the first time in months, she felt something close to peace. Not because she'd won. Because she'd survived. And chosen to stay. The next morning, she had coffee with Min-suk. Same minimalist office. Same city view. He poured 2 cups. Slid one across the desk. I've been thinking, he said. About? About what comes next. For you. Nora took a sip. I'm already working. I know. And you're excellent at it. But, he paused. What do you want? Long term. She was quiet for a moment. No one had asked her that in years. I want to build things, she said finally. Real things. Not just models. Not just analysis. I want to create structures that last. Min-suk nodded slowly. Then we'll make that happen. Just like that. Just like that. She studied him. This man who'd backed her for 3 years without ever demanding visibility. Who'd enforced her contract when it was violated. Who'd stepped into that forum and changed the narrative. Why? Nora asked. Why what? Why protect me? Why invest in someone you knew would stay invisible? Min-suk smiled slightly. Because the best investments aren't the ones everyone sees. They're the ones that hold everything else together. He stood. Walked to the window. You were never supposed to be famous. You were supposed to be essential. And you were. You still are. She felt something shift in her chest. Not gratitude. Not debt. Understanding. Nora asked quietly. What happens now? Min-suk turned back to her. And for the first time since this all began. He didn't have an answer ready. Now, he said. Now you decide. 6 months later. The city looked different at night. Or maybe Nora just saw it differently now. She stood on the rooftop terrace of a building she'd helped restructure, her first independent project under the new arrangement. The company had been hemorrhaging capital. Bad acquisitions. Worse timing. She'd spent 3 months inside their books. Found the patterns. Isolated the problems. Rebuilt the framework. They'd survived. And she'd done it without hiding. The celebration was winding down inside. Executives. Board members. The people who'd bet on her analysis and won. But she'd needed air. Needed quiet. Needed to remember what this felt like when it was just hers. Footsteps behind her. She didn't turn. You're allowed to enjoy this, you know. Min-suk's voice. Nora smiled slightly. I am enjoying it. You're standing alone on a rooftop while people inside are toasting your work. I prefer rooftops to toasts. Min-suk moved to stand beside her. Not close. Just present. They looked out at the city together. Silence. Comfortable. I heard something today, he said eventually. About? Junho. Nora felt the word land. Didn't react. He's working for a consulting firm in Singapore. Mid-level. Quiet. She nodded slowly. Good. Good. I didn't want him destroyed. I just wanted him. She searched for the word. Corrected. He was. She turned to look at Min-suk. Do you think he understands? What he actually did? Min-suk was quiet for a moment. I think he understands he lost something. Whether he understands why, he shrugged. That's not our concern anymore. Nora turned back to the city. Sometimes I think about that night. The ceremony. The way everyone laughed. And I realize they weren't laughing at me. They were laughing at the idea of me. The version they thought I was. Which was powerless. The word hung between them. But you never were, Min-suk said quietly. No. I just didn't know it yet. She paused. Or maybe I knew. I just didn't know it mattered yet. A door opened behind them. Someone from inside. A junior analyst she'd been mentoring. Sorry to interrupt. They're asking for you. Speech. Nora glanced at Min-suk. He smiled slightly. Go. Be visible. She walked toward the door. Stopped. Turned back. Thank you. For everything. Min-suk shook his head. You did this. I just made sure the infrastructure held. Still. He nodded once. You're welcome. Nora went inside. Min-suk stayed on the rooftop. Alone with the city and the quiet. Inside, she gave the speech. Short. Professional. Focused on the work, not the drama. 6 months ago, I stood in front of many of you and said that I wasn't a bet. I was an investment. Nods around the room. Tonight, I want to say something else. This project, this company, was an investment too. And investments only work when people believe in them. When they give them room to grow. When they protect them. Nora looked around the room. Thank you for believing. Not in the story. In the work. Applause. Genuine. Earned. She stepped down. Shook hands. Accepted congratulations. And then, quietly, she left. Nora found Min-suk still on the rooftop. He turned when she approached. That was fast. I said what needed to be said. They stood side by side again. The city breathed below them. Infinite. Indifferent. Moving. Can I ask you something? Nora said. Always. When you saw that video. The ceremony. What did you think? Min-suk was quiet for a long time. I thought someone just made a very expensive mistake. She smiled. Not about Junho. About me. What did you think about me? He turned to face her. I thought she's going to have a choice. Hide or rise. And I wondered which one you'd make. Were you worried I'd hide? No. His voice was certain. You've never hidden from anything that mattered. You just chose your battles carefully. And now? Now you don't have to choose. You can fight them all. If you want to. Nora shook her head. I don't want to fight. I just want to build. Then build. They stood in silence. Two people. Side by side. No promises made. No declarations. Just understanding. The kind that comes from being seen. Really seen. Not as a story or a symbol or a cautionary tale. Just as a person who's good at what they do. And refuses to apologize for it. Nora spoke quietly. Almost to herself. He thought humiliation was the end. Min-suk didn't respond. just listened. She looked out at the city one more time. At the lights, the movement, the endless possibility, and finished the thought. He didn't know it was the beginning. The city kept breathing. The night kept moving. And somewhere between the rooftop and the stars, she finally let herself believe it. Not that she'd won, that she'd survived, and chosen every single day to keep building. He called her a bet at the ceremony. He didn't know who owned her future. Turns out she did. What would you have chosen, disappear or become unbreakable? Tell me in the comments and subscribe for the next story.